Hey, how's it going? In this video, I want to talk about if your 30s are when your dreams go to die. And not sure about you guys, but do you ever sit around and just kind of feel like a loser because all the dreams you had when you were younger that you were going to achieve by the time you were at a certain age, you haven't achieved them, and now you feel like it's a little bit too late, and you're just like, man, I did not do what I wanted to do. And I get that feeling sometimes, and hopefully this video will somewhat address that to a degree. So I think the problem is this, is like when you're 20, in your 20s, you're just like full of hope. Like anything is possible, and you just have all these dreams and aspirations, and you have really no idea of how the world works, right? So all the dreams and aspirations you have are like somewhat realistic, right? It's like, oh, I want to be the CEO of like this big company one day, or I want to travel the world, or I want to do this, I want to do that, right? And I think in this scenario, like being kind of dumb works in your favor because you have nothing in your mind telling you you can't do it. So you can do it because it's possible because you don't know what is or isn't possible. And I think in your 20s, you're full of hope as well because you start from a low base and you just like everything gets better and better because you started from so low, right? So every year, you're like getting better and better. And your entire life has been like that up to that point, right? But in your 30s, it's kind of like when things start turning around. It's like this is the first time in your life where you're getting less attractive every year. Your body is getting probably less fit than it was before. And life kind of starts getting in the way, right? You have different priorities. One thing, you start valuing different things, right? Some people value like families more than career, and things just kind of get in the way where the goals you had before don't seem as realistic anymore, right? Maybe because you're finally realizing what it takes to get there, and you're not willing to trade what it takes to get there for what it is, or maybe because you just don't have the energy to do it anymore, right? And you kind of start losing hope in your dreams. But are you losing your dreams or are you just becoming realistic? That's kind of the question I'm trying to ask here. Another issue with your 30s is you get more experience. Like things get less impressive, right? So things are less exciting. You kind of done everything already. And then you also gain the ability to see the downside to things, right? So for example, it's like you had a dream to become the CEO of some company one day, but you don't realize like the amount of effort it takes to get there and like what you have to sacrifice to get there. So in your 20s or really throughout your entire life, you kind of have this very linear growth trend view on life where every year you advance a grade, go to college, you get a job, you work a couple years in your job, you get better and better. I think in your 30s is when you start to realize like, oh, some years of your life are actually worse than years before because of whatever reason. You got sick, something happens to your family, or the market doesn't do well, whatever it is, right? So you start seeing these dips, right? And then in your 30s, like you start realizing, okay, it's not all linear, it's not all growth. Like I'm losing some years. That's when your dreams kind of fade away because it's not as realistic anymore, right? So I guess the question is like, were you being stupid in your 20s because your dreams were so unrealistic, or are you being stupid now because you don't think your dreams are achievable, right? Because in reality, the only reason your dreams aren't achievable is because you don't believe in them anymore, right? So if you believe in something, I think then it has a possibility of coming true. If you don't believe in it, it's never going to come true, right? So yeah, life isn't linear, but I think one thing that might help you feel better is that results aren't linear either. So just because you went through, a growth phase between let's say 20 and 30, you're not quite where you want to be at, and now you're experiencing downturn. It doesn't mean that it's going to take the same amount of time to achieve some exponential growth, right? There's a book called Atomic Habits. They talk about this a lot, but basically the idea is like you just build a little bit up every day, but the results aren't linear. An example they use is like bamboo takes like 5 years to plant roots, and then all of a sudden they grow like 20 feet in like a couple months. So as long as you have that in mind, I think is a big motivator for you to realize, okay, if I just keep going at it, I'm gonna see results, and I'm not looking at my historical results to see what my future results will be. So in conclusion, I think the point of this video I want to say is just to keep going. Like you are still very young at 30. I know at 30 you start to feel old, but you're still very young. Like for a 70-year-old, between 20s and 30s is probably the same exact thing to that person, right? So for right now, if you're 30, like a 14-year-old to an 18-year-old is probably pretty much the same thing. But to a 14 and 18-year-old, they probably feel a lot different from each other. Your beliefs are everything. So as long as you believe in what you think you can achieve, then you can do it. I think what happens when you're older is like you start to realize the realistic of like reality of things. And I'm not trying to say you should be unrealistic in your reality, but it's still important to have really big goals, right? Just have really big goals. And one way to think about how to have big goals is that even though you didn't achieve what you wanted to do in the last 10 years, it doesn't mean that it's going to take you 10 years to achieve the same amount of what you did last year, right? Because the effort you put in might be linear, but the results are going to be exponential. So hope that helps. Hope that makes sense. See you next video.